Firstly, we're going to speak about the lungs, the pleural sac, and some of the lung surfaces. Now, the pleura is pretty much a thin serous membrane. It's a thin serous cavity that is surrounding both of the lungs. It is made of two layers. There's a parietal pleura, which is intimately associated with the thoracic wall, and then there is a continuous visceral layer, which is intimately associated with the lung itself. And so because of that anatomy, this creates a thin space in between the parietal and visceral pleura where there's a thin amount of fluid called serous fluid, and that helps to lubricate that space, which allows for the movement of this cavity as we breathe. So as the chest rises and falls, as the lungs inflate and deflate, that thin fluid helps to lubricate these two layers so that there isn't any friction and the chest can rise and fall smoothly. We've also got the lung surfaces themselves. So there's the costal surface of the lung, which is the anterior surface of the lung that comes in contact with the lungs. With the ribs, the costal cartilage and the ribs. So the outer aspects of the lungs are called the costal surface. The diaphragmatic surface of each of the lungs are the surface that rests on the diaphragm. So we can think about them as the inferior surfaces. And then the mediastinal surfaces of the lungs are the medial aspects that are intimately connected with the major vessels and with the trachea, right? The division of the trachea into the right and left primary bronchus. So we've got the costal surface, which is connected to the ribs, the diaphragmatic surface, which is resting on the diaphragm, and then the mediastinal surface, which is the middle or the hilum of the lung, connecting to the vessels and to the bronchus. If we look at each lung, we can describe certain regions of the lung beyond the surfaces. So we've got the apex of the lung, which is the pointy surface that's found superiorly. We've got the primary bronchi, so the division of the trachea into right and left structures is called the bronchi. We've got right and left primary bronchi. And then we've got the different lobes of the lung. So we've got the superior lobe and the inferior lobe of the left lung. So the left lung only has two lobes. It's much smaller. And that is thought to be because there's space taken up by the heart. So the heart sits here and it's kind of compressing some of the space. So there are only two lobes found on the left lung. And there's a flap here that's called the lingula of the left lung. Whereas the right lung has three lobes, the superior lobe, the middle lobe, it's kind of wedge-shaped lobe here, and then the inferior lobe. Now, because of those divisions, we can speak about fissures. So fissures are the lines that divide, or the creases or crevices that divide one lobe from the other. So because the left lung only has two lobes, it only has one fissure, right? So it's only going to have an oblique fissure. Whereas the right lung has three lobes, so there are two divisions or two fissures. There is an oblique fissure that separates the middle lobe from the inferior lobe, and then there is a horizontal fissure that separates the superior lobe from the middle lobe.